And a happy retirement it will be to the happy warrior, Roxanne Modafferi. She is going to make the walk for a 45th time as a professional. Listen, first time Roxanne Modafferi fought was in 2003. Casey O'Neill was 6 at that time. Kind of wild. She's taking on the undefeated prospect known as King Casey O'Neill, the Scozzy, representing Scotland and Australia. Her father, Cam, one of the men in charge of Eternal MMA, and a lot of great prospects coming out of Eternal lately. And when it comes to this fight, I mean, for Casey O'Neill, I gotta lay my cards on the table, Matt. I had a pretty good read of Roxanne Modafferi coming into the UFC, you know?
Well, she came in with 45 fights. So.
That's it. No, she really did have an extensive record. She was on the Ultimate Fighter, not once, but twice. She was on it for bantamweight and then for flyweight, and then made it all the way to the title fight at the end and lost to Nico Montano. How crazy is that? I mean, Sajara Eubanks. Who? What? But for Roxanne Modafferi, she is that crafty veteran. We talk about it in all sorts of different divisions. It seems like every weekend there's one of them, like Ed Herman, Matt Brown. There's just fighters like that they know how to win. It's like watching Chavo Guerrero out there in WWE.
Oh, Chavo.
Yeah, Chavo always knew a way. Or Eddie. I lie, I cheat,
Eddie was awesome.
Steal. They knew how to win. Roxanne Modafferi's like that too. She knows exactly how to win. She can get it done with her wonky, weird stand-up. She can get it done on the ground. She's very, very well-rounded. Doesn't accept damage very well, and can get out-wrestled and held in position on the ground. But by and large, Roxanne Modafferi, you know what you're going to get time and again. And sometimes she can surprise you, and in spots like this, beat Macy Barber as a giant underdog. Now, taking on Casey O'Neill, and the reason I set it up that way, Matt, is because for Casey O'Neill, I had very low expectations coming into the UFC. I watched all the tape.
I can't say this often, but this is one of the few prospects that I actually think I was right. Like, normally you've got your eye on the prospects compared to me, like you called Piotr Jan, but Casey O'Neill's one that I could actually be proud of.
I watched her grapple, and it was like, okay, we're lunging in for the takedown, and then we're just kind of going, not really positionally sound, just going for the finish, getting the submission. It just didn't really all gel for me when I watched the Casey O'Neill tape to get ready for coming into the UFC. So she was taking on Shayna Dobson, and I thought, well, Dobson just got the win over Agapova. She can last for a bit. She can hang. I know she has a terrible record, but just put yourself in my shoes, and I'm going to talk you through it. Well, Casey O'Neill looked amazing in that fight. So then she took on Laura Procopio, who hung in there with Carol Hossa and had a competitive fight at 135, and Lara's a finisher, and I figured, okay, Lara's going to get it done. And Lara looked good to start that fight. She did, until she ended up getting submitted, and it was pretty weird. And then when Casey O'Neill went to take on Antonina Shevchenko, it was like, okay, all right, I'm firmly entrenched in this one. I think Casey O'Neill's going to get the win. And boy, did she ever get the win against Antonina Shevchenko. And listen, Antonina's not Valentina. We all know this. Pavel knows it. But when it comes to that fight, Antonina's a good kickboxer. When she's set in her way, she's very good. And when she grapples the way that she wants to grapple, Antonina can be good. But Casey O'Neill was all over that fight. And when it comes to a fight like this, that's how it makes it so interesting. Undefeated prospect, under 25, taking on the veteran who's almost 40 years old. 45th pro fight. How do you see this one going?
So in the UFC, there's two different kinds of retirement fights. There's the version of Yair Rodriguez versus BJ Penn, and I understand BJ Penn had like 7 retirement fights before that, but still, there's those fights where it's like, okay, BJ, you're still sticking around, like we're going to beat this out of you, and then you can be on your merry way. And then there's other retirement fights where it's like Little Nog versus Sam Alvey, where it's like, hey, this isn't going to be like a guaranteed win by any means, but let's say you put in the work in your training camp and you're one of the better versions at this stage of your career, then this is a very winnable fight. This is a lot closer to BJ Penn versus Yair Rodriguez than any other one I can think of. Like, I think this is a difficult fight for Roxanne Modafferi.
Yeah, and it's kind of Cain Velasquez and Ngannou, but in a different way, right?
A little bit. It's just, this is my problem with Roxanne Modafferi, and this is a stat that always This is a stat that always really stands out to me. Before she fought Barb Honchak, who she ended up beating by TKO, funny enough, there was a stat that was like, yeah, Roxanne's never got a knockdown in her career. That really worries me. Like, if you're trying to beat Casey O'Neill, you're not going to out-grapple her. You're not going to out-cardio her, out-physique her. Because that's the thing about O'Neill that I do think is an important thing to bring up. She's way stronger than she looks. Like, she's just one of those fighters who has the grip. It's kind of like when you watch Daniel Cormier fight. Like, yes, DC looks strong, but they just flipping people over his head. Casey O'Neill has that kind of grappling strength, squeeze power that we don't normally see just from a random prospect making their way up. Like, I think Casey O'Neill is a very, very unique prospect and a very unique fighter on her way into the rankings, and I do think that if she is able to get this win over Roxanne, this might be one of the worst wins possibly for her in her UFC career, because I really do think that this is one of those fights where it's like, okay, Casey, you're good, and we all know you're good, but when you beat Roxanne, there is not an easy fight for you after that. So we're going to learn a lot about both fighters, well, I guess especially Casey O'Neill, but I do think this will be a fun fight. Like, you know, Roxanne's not just going to think, okay, I'm going to show up for a paycheck, this is my last fight. Like, she is as tough as they come, and I do think she'll make a good account of herself.
If you have a look at women's flyweight right now, Roxanne Modafferi ranked 12th, Casey O'Neill at 15, 14 Modafferi. What? Mano's going to fight for a title. If it's not this year, it's next year. But you look up and down. I mean, Tyler Santos able to get the win over Modafferi and then another one over Joanne Wood. She's ranked 5th. So this is a really good opportunity for Casey O'Neill. I would think we're in the realm of like a Cynthia Calvillo next, which is kind of scary. I mean, it really is. But when I do look at this fight and I look at the odds, Modafferi open to plus 210. She's plus 282. Her only knockdown in the UFC out of all of the fights was against Macy Barber. That's the only one. The one against, or for Casey O'Neill, the line, she opened to minus 250, minus 369 right now. It's juiced. It's juiced. We have a look at the Topology votes, Matt. I'm going to set the over-under at 90%. What are you going to say? You're going to say over? Oh, barely. 829 total votes, 92% going with Casey O'Neill, 47% by decision, 38% by knockout. For the 8% that I'm Modafferi, 70% by decision. If you look at it for Roxanne Modafferi, again, hasn't been able to get those wins, but she's only taken on the top of the top level competition in her UFC run. And I'm going to go through it. Lost to Tyler Santos, lost to Viviane Araujo, lost to Lauren Murphy, Jennifer Maia, Sajara Eubanks, Nico Montano. Ooh. And then outside of the UFC, Jennifer Maia, Vanessa Porto, Raquel Pennington, Barb Honchak, like Rosie Sexton, the doctor. So it really is tough. And again, Roxanne's only ever fought good competition since 2003. Like, somebody should print that on a shirt.
They should.
When it comes to this fight,
I was in kindergarten in 2003. I've lived a lot since Roxanne Modafferi started her MMA career.
I was 9. But when it comes to this fight, Casey O'Neill's got that grappling heavy style that I think can cause problems for Modafferi, who has great jiu-jitsu. It's just, if you can take her down, then you can probably hold her down.
And Corey Anderson taught us one of the most famous lessons in MMA. There's levels to this grappling game, and I do think Casey O'Neill's on another level with her grappling. And the thing with Modafferi is that she's just not that physically strong, so she does have a really hard time defending takedowns when her opponent does get deep into her hips. And if O'Neill is able to get deep into her hips at some point, I think she'll be able to finish the takedown and rain down a lot of ground and pound.
Well, in the words of the future Bellator light heavyweight champ, Matt, saying there's levels to this, we are both going with King Casey O'Neill to bring the win back to Scotland and Australia by way of Las Vegas. And I can't wait for this fight. Let us know down below who you have in this one between Syndicate's own Roxanne Modafferi on the retirement tour. Will it be like Mariano Rivera or even like David Ortiz? Or will the young prospect be able to get the win? I can't wait for this fight and the rest of this card up at the top. Big time bangers that you're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.